Howdy, my name is Maddie Stork and I will be doing a presentation on Delta Airlines. Delta Airlines first began its operations in 1924 and 1925 in Macon, Georgia. Their original name before becoming Delta Airlines in 1928 was Huff, Doll, Duster. And they only had flights going from Dallas, Mississippi, and Louisiana at the time. In the 1940s, the only people that used Delta Airlines were just the Delta executives. When the United States entered into World War II, Delta offered its services for the Air Force operations and modifications, so all their aircrafts, producing new engines and also training the pilots. In the mid-1950s, Delta added visual inspections and X-ray to machines to all aircrafts. And also in 1953, Delta added its first international operations flights to the Caribbean's Caracas. In 1966, CEO and founder woman died, and the first African American flight attendant for Delta, Patricia Murphy, took his place as interim CEO. Her first action as CEO was to seize all crop dusting opportunities. In 1960, Delta moved its headquarters from Macon, Georgia to Atlanta, Georgia. In 1972, Patricia also added new flights to its manifest to Canada, Bahamas, and Bermuda. Also in 1972, the government added a no smoking regulation to its flights, but Delta refused to do that and continued to let passengers smoke on their flights. In 1975, Delta created Air Express, allowing cargo and mail services for a high priority for destinations. The Airline Deregulation Act was also passed in 1975, allowing Delta to fly transatlantic. So their first transatlantic flight was from Atlanta to London. In 1984, Delta was named the #1 company to work for. In the mid-1980s, Delta also merged with Western Airlines, becoming a larger company. In the late 1980s, Delta began becoming trans-Pacific, adding its first trans-Pacific flight from Portland to Tokyo. In 1990 through 1991, while Desert Storm was happening, Delta participated in the Civil Reserve Air Fleet, which was they just assisted in military chartering. Soon after Desert Storm, Delta purchased Pan Am, which they received all of their aircrafts and their shuttles, making Delta the largest company in 1991. In 1996, Delta set up their website, allowing passengers to make their reservations online. In 2001, Delta experienced their first financial loss as soon after 9/11 happened. They had to shut down all operations for 2 days. In 2002, Delta installed their first self-service kiosks, and they also sponsored the Olympic Games. In 2002, Delta also received an OSHA star. They were the first airline company to receive this award. The OSHA Star Award is just a status for occupation, employee safety, and health codes. In 2005, Delta files for bankruptcy due to adding flights to the Latin Americans and Caribbeans, which they weren't selling. At the time, there wasn't a demand for it, and prices were just way too high. But later, the public just forgot about this bankruptcy. In 2008, Delta merges with Northwestern, and the Sky Miles rewards ends in 2008. In 2012, Delta becomes the most popular airline company out of the world. In 2014, Delta celebrates its 85 years of service and will soon be celebrating their 100th. In 2015, Delta partners with China Eastern Air. And then in 2018, Delta switches from Boeing to Airbus, and they are currently ranked the 75th on the Fortune 500 list. For the pastel analysis, first is political. There was a deregulation in the late 1970s, so that would allow the transatlantic and transpacific flights. When 9/11 happened, the government was heavily involved in adding more rules and regulations to the airlines company just for the safety of the passengers and the public. There was also a huge tax increase with the increase of taxes, the aviation tax was way higher than alcohol and tobacco taxes. For economic, there was with reduced prices. Ticket prices, there will be an increase in demand, and will increase the global markets. Globalization is just to connect buyers and sellers, and sales increase whenever there's increase in globalization. There is a growth happening in revenues of freight volumes and the number of passengers that are also flying these nowadays. Traffic growth is supposed to increase 10 to 15% in the upcoming 2 years. And also the employment rate for airline companies has also increased due to the sales and the revenues that airline companies are needing more employees. So those are increasing. Social and cultural. So shifting preferences is the target goal for all airline companies. Airline companies are not doing their jobs. They are giving the wrong experience to its passengers. Airline companies are trying to fit as many people as they can, and with these seat regulations, they're supposed to be a certain width and length. So they're making those regulations as close as they can to those try to make passengers happy, which is not. Passengers like a little bit of room. They don't want to be crammed up next to somebody and who sleeps, snores, or even drools, or even like a kid, or even like a crying baby. They don't want to be close to that. They want the elbow room. So passengers are just being miserable, and airline companies are upset that passengers are upset. So they're trying to make them happy. Airline companies are also having an issue with bad press. Bad press is just when the passengers can record anything with their devices, like the one happened with United a few years ago when a passenger was ripped out of his seat due to an overbooking issue that United had, and everyone recorded it, and it spread worldwide, and United had hit a tremendous downfall due to that issue. Technology is always improving and has a huge impact. Almost everything involves technology, from the planes to the ticketing to even baggage claim. Everything is electronic. There's new opportunities to grow with technology, and which would add more jobs and services for people. Online booking is an example of this technology. It could be improved, making it easier for passengers to purchase airline tickets, even though you can just easily do it from your phone or for a phone call. Global, there's an issue with diseases and terrorism, like 9/11. They ceased operations for most of the United States for about 2 to 3 days. The exchange rate is very difficult. Most countries don't have a 1-to-1 ratio like us and a few other countries. For example, like Canada, you lose about 50 cents for the dollar. So the exchange rate is bad. And also the cost of spending on security has increased as well just because of the terrorism tax. For demographic forecasting, customers are expected to add a value-added service. They want the great customer service. That's why they choose certain companies. The main general demographics characteristics are just age, gender, position, and your education level. Airline companies are more catered to the older generation because they're the ones who are retired. They have more leisure time. They can spend all their money, so they go and travel all these places, not like us millennials who don't really have the money or the funds to go and travel the world. Employment satisfaction is also a demographic issue. Employment satisfaction is just based on the opportunities that people promote, the atmosphere of the company, of how they enjoy the company, their work ethics, their pay, and how they interact with the other employees. Females are having a hard issue at the moment because the female flight attendants are not getting paid the same as the male flight attendants, and they're not getting the opportunities to take more flights, take more risk, or female pilots. They're not getting as many flights as the male pilots. So what is the airline industry? The airline industry is based on the size of service. So there are 4 basic sizes: international, domestic, regional, and intercontinental. So international is basically everything globally. So Delta, United, those are the big main companies that fly internationally. Then you have domestic, which just flies within a specific country, like Southwest. Regional is mainly private airline companies where they just go from region to region. And then you have intercontinental, which is you stay in a specific continent, but you travel between the countries on that continent. So like for North America, it's Canada, United States, and Mexico, and the Latin American countries. And that's mainly the same like international. So Delta, United, and Southwest is also adding services to like Mexico and those Latin American countries. The airline industry is a global industry. They travel all over the world. And it's also either a private or a business matter. So private is more for like the charterers, and then you have business like Delta, United, Southwest. Those are the businesses. And then it's also passenger or cargo based cargo based. Many of the larger airline companies, or most of the major airline companies, are passenger and cargo based. But there's some cargo only operations like air chartering services. They are cargo only. They really don't do passengers unless it's super specific and it's like celebrities. Those are really the only ones that really do, is what they do. And then you also either have scheduled or non-scheduled. So scheduled is like your just general